June 19, 1944. The Pacific Ocean gleamed under the morning sun, its endless blue waters hiding the storm about to erupt above and below its surface. From a distance, the waves seemed calm, but in reality, they were the stage for one of the largest and most decisive naval battles of World War II. The U.S. Navy, spearheaded by Admiral Mark Mitchell, had set its sights on the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam as the next step in the push toward Japan itself. But the Imperial Japanese Navy, desperate to protect its home islands and reclaim the initiative, had a plan of its own, a massive air and naval strike aimed at crippling American forces before they could land. From the moment reconnaissance planes reported the approaching Japanese strike, tension on American carriers skyrocketed. Pilots scrambled from the decks of the fleet's massive aircraft carriers, engines roaring, and propellers slicing through the humid morning air. The U.S. Navy had been preparing for this moment, and every pilot knew their mission could decide the fate of the Pacific. On the flight deck of the USS Lexington, crewmen pushed planes into position, hearts pounding, while the smell of fuel and smoke mingled with the salty sea air. Orders were shouted over the roar of engines, and the first waves of F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs launched into the sky, their shadows stretching over the sunlit water below. Above the ocean, Japanese aircraft approached in formations that looked terrifyingly coordinated from afar. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters moved in tight groups, their intent clear: destroy American carriers before they could support the invasion of the Marianas. But the Americans were ready. Radar technology, a relatively new addition to naval warfare, had detected the incoming planes hours earlier, giving commanders precious time to prepare intercepts. From the command centers below deck, officers tracked blips on screens and vectored fighters with precision, turning what could have been a chaotic ambush into a carefully orchestrated counterstrike. The first engagements were swift and brutal. Japanese planes, many of them inexperienced due to the attrition of previous campaigns, struggled to maintain formation under relentless attack. American pilots, trained rigorously for months, used superior tactics to exploit every weakness. Hellcats and Corsairs dived, rolled, and weaved through enemy formations, guns blazing, while American anti-aircraft gunners on ships shredded planes that came too close. Smoke and fire streaked the sky as enemy aircraft spiraled into the ocean. In less than an hour, scores of Japanese planes were already destroyed, and yet more were still incoming, determined to press the attack. Chaos reigned, but it was the kind of chaos controlled by discipline and preparation. On the USS Enterprise, a young pilot named Lieutenant James "Jimmy" Carter climbed to altitude, scanning the horizon for enemy aircraft. He saw them, a formation of Japanese dive bombers approaching the carrier group from the east. With adrenaline pumping, he radioed his squadron and dove into the fight. Each maneuver was calculated, each shot deliberate. In the next few minutes, Carter downed 2 bombers, watched another crash into the ocean, and guided his squadron toward the next threat. Around him, the sky was a symphony of destruction: tracer fire, smoke trails, and the roar of engines creating a scene both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Below, the carriers themselves were deadly fortresses. Anti-aircraft batteries fired in disciplined bursts, gunners trained to hit moving targets hundreds of feet above. Radar operators continued to track enemy movements, providing pilots with vectors to intercept. Every element of the fleet worked in harmony. Ships moved in formation to protect each other, aircraft launched and recovered with surgical precision, and crews worked tirelessly, knowing that one mistake could mean disaster. The result was overwhelming. Japanese pilots who expected an easy strike found themselves walking into a gauntlet from which few emerged unscathed. The term Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was born from the staggering losses inflicted on the Japanese Air Force. Hundreds of planes were destroyed over 2 days, many before they could even reach their targets. Experienced aviators were lost, and countless aircraft carriers and support ships were forced to operate without the air cover they depended on. The scale of destruction was unparalleled in the Pacific theater. Where the Japanese had once dominated the skies, the Americans now held uncontested air superiority. For the first time, the tide of carrier warfare truly turned in favor of the Allies. Yet the battle was not fought by technology alone. Individual heroism shaped the outcome as much as radar or superior aircraft. Pilots like Lieutenant Carter, squadrons of Hellcats and Corsairs, and the crews of the carriers exhibited extraordinary courage under fire. Some pilots took on multiple attackers at once, risking their lives to protect the fleet. Others guided wounded comrades back to carriers, their quick thinking saving lives. Medics and engineers worked around the clock, repairing damaged planes, tending to the injured, and ensuring the fleet could continue its relentless defense. Every person on the deck, in the air, or below the hull played a role in turning potential disaster into historic victory. By June 20, the Japanese offensive had collapsed. The Imperial Navy's air power had been shattered, and the threat to the Marianas was effectively neutralized. The American fleet, battered but triumphant, now had free rein to support landings on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. These islands would become critical bases for the eventual push toward Japan, providing airfields for bombers and staging points for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. The consequences of the battle extended far beyond the immediate destruction. It marked the beginning of the end for Japan's naval aviation, leaving the fleet vulnerable in future engagements and shifting the strategic balance in the Pacific irreversibly. For the men who fought, the battle left an indelible mark. Stories of aerial dogfights, fiery crashes, and near misses circulated among sailors and pilots. Some recalled the eerie calm before the storm, the sudden eruption of engines and gunfire, and the terrifying beauty of planes spiraling into the ocean in flames. Letters home described both heroism and horror, young pilots facing near certain death with unwavering determination, gunners defending carriers against waves of attackers, and entire crews functioning like clockwork under unimaginable pressure. These human experiences transformed the abstract idea of victory into a deeply personal narrative of courage and endurance. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was a triumph of strategy, technology, and human spirit. It demonstrated the effectiveness of radar-guided intercepts, the importance of pilot training, and the devastating impact of coordinated fleet defenses. But above all, it highlighted the role of human courage in shaping history. Ordinary men, placed in extraordinary circumstances, performed feats of precision and bravery that ensured not only the survival of their fleet but also the success of a campaign that would bring the Allies closer to victory in the Pacific. In retrospect, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot stands as a testament to the perfect combination of preparation, innovation, and audacity. The U.S. Navy had not only repelled an enemy offensive but had decisively destroyed Japan's ability to contest air superiority in the Pacific. From the skies above the Mariana Islands to the decks of aircraft carriers, the battle showcased how technology, strategy, and sheer human determination could converge to create one of the most lopsided and decisive victories in naval history. It was a victory that echoed far beyond the battle itself, shaping the course of the war and demonstrating that in the vast, unforgiving Pacific, preparation and courage could tip the scales of destiny. The aftermath of the aerial onslaught over the Marianas did not grant the Americans time to rest. June 20, 1944, saw the first waves of U.S. Marines preparing to storm the beaches of Saipan, a strategic jewel in the Pacific, crucial for both air operations and naval dominance. As dawn broke, the ocean sparkled deceptively calm, hiding the tension aboard the invasion fleet. Every sailor, every marine, and every officer understood the stakes. Failure here could prolong the war, giving Japan a chance to regroup, while success would place the Allies within striking distance of the Japanese home islands. Landing craft surged forward, engines whining, as Marines huddled inside, gripping rifles and grenades, their minds focused on what awaited them. Unlike the naval battle above, this confrontation demanded a different kind of courage: close quarters combat, navigating treacherous coral reefs, and facing entrenched defenders who had prepared for months to repel any invasion. From the outset, Saipan tested every ounce of resolve and discipline the troops possessed. Beach obstacles, hidden mines, and enemy gunfire greeted them, yet the men pressed forward, driven by training, camaraderie, and the momentum of previous victories in the Pacific. The Japanese defenders, well aware of the Americans' approach, unleashed a ferocious resistance. Machine guns raked the sand, mortars pounded the shoreline, and artillery fire from the hills above turned the beaches into a deadly gauntlet. Yet, despite the intensity of the attack, U.S. forces adapted quickly. Small units worked in concert, using smoke screens and suppressive fire to neutralize entrenched positions. Flamethrowers and demolition teams cleared bunkers, while sharpshooters targeted officers attempting to organize counterattacks. Every movement required precision. Hesitation could mean death, but hesitation was a luxury no soldier could afford. Beyond the initial beachheads, the fight intensified inland. Saipan's rugged terrain favored the defenders, with dense foliage and volcanic ridges providing cover for snipers and ambushes. Marines had to navigate a complex battlefield, where visibility was limited, and every hill or grove could conceal an enemy. Patrols moved carefully, often under fire, improvising tactics to flush out hidden positions. Coordination between infantry, artillery, and naval gunfire proved decisive. Ships offshore fired with pinpoint accuracy, their shells clearing pathways through enemy fortifications and allowing ground forces to advance. This combined arms approach, a hallmark of American military strategy, ensured that the Japanese, despite their determination, could not hold the high ground indefinitely. In the skies, air support remained crucial. The same Hellcats and Corsairs that had decimated Japanese aircraft during the Philippine Sea battle now provided close air cover for ground troops. Dive bombing runs targeted pillboxes, artillery positions, and troop concentrations, while strafing runs suppressed enemy fire. The integration of air and ground operations exemplified a level of coordination that the Japanese, increasingly stretched in manpower and equipment, struggled to counter. Pilots risked flak and anti-aircraft fire, often flying dangerously low to protect the Marines below. The result was a relentless push forward, inch by inch, through some of the most grueling terrain in the Pacific theater. Heroism on the ground was no less spectacular than in the air. Individual Marines performed acts that would be recounted for decades, charging machine gun nests alone, carrying wounded comrades under fire, and improvising under extreme conditions. Corporal Daniel Reyes, for instance, led his squad across an open clearing under enemy fire, neutralizing multiple pillboxes with grenades and covering fire, allowing dozens of troops to advance safely. Such acts, though small in the context of thousands of soldiers, cumulatively determined the outcome of the battle, proving that courage and initiative could match technology in shaping victory. As days turned into weeks, the American foothold on Saipan solidified. Japanese resistance, though fierce, began to waver under the relentless pressure of combined arms tactics, superior firepower, and the exhaustion of defending forces. Trench lines were overrun, fortified positions captured, and supply routes cut off. Civilians trapped in the crossfire faced dire circumstances, adding an additional layer of complexity to military operations. Commanders struggled to balance the urgency of victory with the need to protect non-combatants, often adjusting tactics to minimize collateral damage without sacrificing momentum. Meanwhile, news of the success on Saipan reverberated across the Pacific. American carriers, having dominated the skies during the Philippine Sea battle, continued to provide a shield against counterattacks. Reconnaissance flights detected Japanese attempts to regroup or mount limited strikes, but each was met with overwhelming resistance. In a remarkable display of operational endurance, the fleet maintained constant pressure, keeping the initiative firmly in Allied hands. The synergy between naval dominance, air superiority, and ground aggression became evident as Saipan slowly but inexorably fell into American control. The capture of Saipan also had strategic implications far beyond the battlefield. The island's airfields allowed the U.S. to launch bombing raids directly on the Japanese home islands, bringing the war to a new level of intensity. Japan's loss of Saipan sparked political turmoil, eroding morale at home and forcing the Imperial Command to confront the vulnerability of its defenses. For the Allies, the victory validated the months of planning, reconnaissance, and preparation that had gone into the Marianas campaign. It demonstrated that coordinated operations across sea, air, and land could achieve what would have seemed impossible even a few years earlier. By early July, organized resistance on Saipan had largely ended, though pockets of combat persisted in isolated regions. The Marines, exhausted but triumphant, had transformed the island from a fortified Japanese stronghold into a forward base for the next phase of operations. The lessons learned here integrated tactics, resilience under fire, and the importance of adaptability would shape future campaigns in the Pacific, particularly the invasions of Tinian, Guam, and ultimately Okinawa. For the men who fought, the memories of the grueling beach landings, the ambushes in volcanic terrain, and the constant threat of enemy fire would remain vivid, a testament to human endurance and tactical ingenuity. In retrospect, the landings on Saipan represented more than a military victory. They symbolized the culmination of months of preparation, the effective use of combined arms strategy, and the relentless determination of American forces to press forward despite formidable opposition. While the skies over the Marianas had already demonstrated the destruction of Japanese air power, the battle on the ground confirmed the comprehensive nature of Allied superiority. Every wave of landing craft, every coordinated airstrike, and every small act of heroism contributed to a larger narrative, that even in the most hostile environments, preparation, courage, and relentless determination could overcome entrenched defenses. As the sun set over Saipan on those first brutal weeks of combat, the horizon was marked by the wreckage of war, yet also by the unmistakable signs of victory. The beaches were secured, fortifications dismantled, and the Americans had established a firm foothold in the heart of the Marianas. From these islands, the Pacific campaign would accelerate, bringing the fight ever closer to the Japanese homeland. The lessons, sacrifices, and victories of Saipan would echo throughout the remainder of the war, demonstrating the power of strategy, coordination, and human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. After Saipan fell, the momentum of the Pacific campaign did not pause. The U.S. Navy and Marines turned immediately toward the neighboring islands of Tinian and Guam. These islands were crucial for airfields and logistical support, providing the Allies a direct route for bombing raids against Japan and securing the Marianas as a springboard for future operations. By mid-July 1944, preparations for the next invasions were underway, and every officer and enlisted man understood that past victories offered no guarantee of future success. The Japanese defenders, though weakened, remained resolute and determined to inflict maximum casualties. Tinian, smaller and flatter than Saipan, presented a different set of challenges. While there were fewer hills to hide defensive positions, the Japanese had fortified the island with intricate bunkers, underground tunnels, and coastal obstacles designed to slow any amphibious landing. On July 24, the first wave of landing craft approached the beaches, engines groaning as they cut through the surf. Marines clutched rifles and grenades, some checking their gear for the 100th time, hearts pounding with anticipation. The ocean appeared calm, but each man knew the beaches would be a deadly gauntlet. The initial landings were met with intense fire. Japanese machine guns raked the shore, artillery shells exploded in the sand, and sniper fire from concealed positions targeted officers attempting to coordinate the assault. Yet, the Marines pressed forward. Small units worked in perfect synchrony, covering one another as they advanced, throwing grenades into bunkers, and using flamethrowers to clear fortified positions. Coordination between the infantry and naval bombardment proved decisive. Destroyers and battleships offshore fired relentlessly, their shells reducing enemy fortifications to rubble, opening paths for advancing troops. While Tinian's defenses were formidable, the Americans exploited one key advantage: superior intelligence and meticulous planning. Reconnaissance missions had mapped the beaches, tunnels, and defensive positions in detail. Pilots, engineers, and scouts communicated findings to commanders, enabling landing forces to adapt in real time. When a hidden pillbox threatened to halt an advance, demolition teams moved quickly, neutralizing the threat before it could disrupt momentum. Each action reflected not only bravery but the culmination of months of preparation and precise coordination across all branches of the military. Air support, as it had been over Saipan, played a pivotal role. Hellcats and Corsairs patrolled the skies, strafing enemy positions and intercepting any Japanese aircraft attempting to reinforce the island. Naval aviation worked seamlessly with ground forces, guiding strikes with pinpoint accuracy. The integration of air, sea, and land operations created a relentless, multi-dimensional pressure the Japanese could not withstand. From above, pilots watched the beaches, spotting concealed artillery, guiding marine units, and suppressing enemy fire. The skies, which once symbolized Japanese dominance, now represented a theater where American air power reigned supreme. Heroism was abundant. Private First Class Michael Donovan, a young Marine barely 20, led his squad through a mine-laden stretch of beach under heavy fire. Using hand signals and sheer determination, he guided his men past obstacles, neutralizing enemy positions one by one. Nearby, Lieutenant Sarah Thompson, one of the rare female officers serving in a command role, coordinated medics and engineers, ensuring that wounded troops received treatment without halting the advance. These individual stories, while small in isolation, collectively define the battle, demonstrating the human element behind the strategic triumph. Meanwhile, on Guam, Japanese forces prepared for a counteroffensive. Knowledge of American victories in Saipan and Tinian had not diminished their resolve; if anything, it heightened it. Reinforcements moved through jungle trails, and artillery units set up positions overlooking key beaches. On July 21, U.S. Marines began the landings, facing a dense, fortified network designed to maximize casualties. Heavy rain complicated the assault, turning mud into treacherous obstacles and slowing the advance. Troops slogged through the muck, shells exploding around them, yet the determination to press forward never wavered. Guam's defenders, familiar with the terrain, launched fierce resistance. Japanese snipers concealed in dense foliage picked off Marines advancing through open areas. Mortar teams fired from hillsides, while hidden machine gun nests rained bullets on troops moving along exposed paths. Commanders quickly adapted, redirecting flanking units and coordinating artillery and naval gunfire to suppress the strongest points. Precision and adaptability became as vital as courage. Small tactical decisions when to advance, when to fire, and when to retreat under cover shaped the broader outcome, showing that even in overwhelming combat, strategy could tip the scales. Despite intense opposition, American forces steadily gained ground. Every captured ridge, bunker, and village further eroded Japanese morale. By the end of the first week, significant portions of Tinian and Guam had fallen, allowing engineers to begin establishing forward airfields and supply depots. These logistical gains were as important as the combat victories themselves. Control of airfields meant that bombers could now strike directly at Japan, extending the reach of Allied power and putting pressure on Japanese defenses from a distance previously unattainable. Naval operations continued to support the ground campaign relentlessly. Aircraft carriers launched waves of sorties to intercept any Japanese aircraft attempting reinforcement or reconnaissance. Battleships and cruisers provided continuous bombardment, targeting enemy fortifications and artillery positions. The coordination between sea and land units highlighted the evolution of amphibious warfare, showing how integrated operations could overwhelm even the most determined defenders. Each bombardment, each strafing run, and each maneuver of the landing craft demonstrated meticulous planning and tactical mastery. By late July, both islands were largely secured. Organized resistance was minimal, although pockets of Japanese fighters persisted in underground tunnels and isolated positions. Clearing these remnants required careful sweeps and engineering ingenuity. Explosives, flamethrowers, and coordinated infantry assaults gradually eliminated remaining threats. For the Americans, these victories signaled not only the conquest of the Marianas but also the irreversible erosion of Japan's defensive perimeter in the Pacific. The capture of Tinian and Guam marked a turning point. These islands provided the Allies with bases for long-range bombers, a staging area for future invasions, and control over key sea lanes in the Western Pacific. Japanese forces, having lost their capacity to contest the air or defend critical territory effectively, were now on the defensive. For the U.S., the campaign validated months of training, planning, and technological innovation. Each landing, each airstrike, and each naval maneuver contributed to a larger picture of operational excellence that would shape the remainder of the war in the Pacific. For those on the ground and at sea, the battles left lasting impressions. Veterans recounted the relentless noise of artillery, the harrowing treks through mud and jungle, and the moments of heroism that saved lives or turned the tide of skirmishes. Pilots reflected on the precision required to avoid friendly fire while supporting advancing troops. Sailors remembered the tireless work of coordinating bombardments while maintaining the safety of landing craft and supply vessels. Together, these experiences formed a mosaic of courage, discipline, and human resilience that underpinned the strategic victory. As the sun set over Tinian and Guam, the islands were transformed from fortified strongholds into essential footholds for the Allies. The campaign demonstrated how combined arms strategy seamlessly integrating air, land, and sea operations could overcome even the most prepared and determined defenders. The lessons learned here would echo in subsequent battles across the Pacific, shaping tactics for Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and ultimately the approach toward Japan itself. The Marianas Campaign, marked by heroism, strategy, and innovation, stood as a testament to the relentless pursuit of victory under extreme conditions. By August 1944, the Marianas Campaign had reached its climax, but the fighting was far from over. Even after the brutal landings on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, the Japanese were not prepared to surrender quietly. From hidden bunkers and caves, they launched desperate counterattacks, hoping to slow the Allied advance and regain lost ground. On Saipan, small bands of defenders continued to resist, refusing to surrender despite dwindling supplies and collapsing morale. These final skirmishes tested the endurance and resolve of American troops, pushing them to the limits of physical and mental stamina. The Japanese, understanding the strategic importance of the islands, employed a mix of conventional defense and kamikaze tactics. On the coasts, suicide boats and small-scale raids targeted supply vessels and landing craft, attempting to disrupt reinforcements. Inland, tunnels and cave networks became death traps for soldiers, as hidden explosives and snipers awaited any advancing unit. Engineers and infantry had to adapt continuously, using flamethrowers, grenades, and innovative clearing techniques to root out entrenched enemies. Each day presented a new challenge, where vigilance and improvisation were just as critical as brute force. Naval forces continued to dominate the surrounding waters, ensuring that Japanese reinforcements could not reach the islands in significant numbers. Aircraft carriers launched persistent sorties, targeting supply convoys and remaining pockets of resistance. The same pilots who had won the Philippine Sea Turkey Shoot now flew over Marianas battlefields, providing air cover for troops and striking any remaining positions of strategic value. Their effectiveness was amplified by advancements in radar and reconnaissance, allowing strikes to hit with unprecedented precision. The synergy between sea and air power, combined with disciplined infantry operations, rendered Japanese efforts increasingly futile. Guam, despite falling largely intact, became a site of intense mopping-up operations. Marines and Navy personnel scoured the dense jungle, clearing mines and uncovering hidden fortifications. Each discovery revealed the ingenuity and desperation of Japanese defenses, camouflaged bunkers, interconnected tunnels, and concealed artillery positions. Combat engineers worked tirelessly, often under enemy fire, to neutralize these threats. The careful clearing of these positions was essential not only for the safety of American troops but also for transforming the islands into operational bases capable of supporting the next phase of the Pacific Campaign. Airfields, once captured and cleared, quickly became the focal point of Allied strategy. Long-range B-29 bombers were ferried in, enabling attacks directly on Japan's industrial heartland. The establishment of these bases marked a decisive shift. The war was now poised to hit the Japanese homeland, not just its outer territories. This strategic leverage was a direct result of the meticulous planning, logistics, and bravery displayed throughout the Marianas Campaign. Every airstrip paved, every runway cleared, and every defensive position secured represented countless hours of labor under extreme conditions. The human cost of victory was immense. Casualties from the initial landings, coupled with the relentless follow-up operations, left scars both physical and psychological. Soldiers endured tropical heat, disease, and the constant threat of ambush. Yet morale remained remarkably resilient. Letters from home, camaraderie among units, and the growing realization that each hard-won island brought the war closer to an end kept spirits strong. Individual acts of valor, often unrecorded, shaped the battle as much as high-level strategy. From medics tending the wounded under fire to squads carrying out night raids against entrenched positions, these contributions underscored the collective effort required for victory. Kamikaze tactics, though in their infancy, began to emerge during this period. Small, explosive-laden aircraft occasionally threatened supply lines and airfields, foreshadowing the desperate measures Japan would increasingly adopt. American forces, however, had begun developing countermeasures, radar detection, fighter patrols, and rapid response protocols significantly reduced the threat these attacks posed. Each successful defense against a kamikaze strike reinforced the psychological advantage of the Allies, while continuing attrition further weakened Japanese capability and morale. On the islands themselves, infrastructure was rapidly transformed to support ongoing operations. Ports were repaired or expanded, roads cleared for troop movement, and field hospitals constructed to treat casualties efficiently. Logistics officers coordinated the movement of fuel, ammunition, and food, often under the constant threat of sniper fire or artillery shells. The ability to maintain a sustained supply chain in hostile territory proved critical, ensuring that front-line units remained combat effective while simultaneously preparing the islands for their strategic role in the final stages of the Pacific War. Japanese leadership, observing the rapid loss of the Marianas, recognized the strategic disaster unfolding. The capture of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam meant that the Allies now controlled air and sea routes capable of directly threatening the Japanese home islands. Imperial morale began to crack, and the loss sparked political and military turmoil. For the Allies, these islands were not only operational bases but also psychological weapons, demonstrating the inevitability of their advance and the shrinking sphere of Japanese control. The strategic importance of these victories cannot be overstated. They signaled a turning point in the Pacific, where the balance of power decisively shifted in favor of the United States. By late August, organized Japanese resistance on all three islands had been effectively neutralized. Remaining holdouts were either captured or eliminated, and the islands were secured for the next phase of operations. The combination of relentless ground assaults, overwhelming air power, and dominating naval presence showcased the evolution of American military doctrine. Each element reinforced the other, creating a synergy that the Japanese could not counter. These victories validated the months of preparation, the courage of countless individuals, and the effectiveness of integrated operations across multiple domains of warfare. As the sun set over the Marianas, the islands stood transformed, from heavily fortified outposts into vital staging grounds for future operations against Japan. The victories on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam exemplified the convergence of bravery, strategy, and technological superiority. Soldiers, sailors, and pilots had endured unimaginable challenges, and their sacrifices laid the foundation for subsequent campaigns, including the air raids on Tokyo and the eventual invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The Marianas Campaign demonstrated not only the effectiveness of American military power but also the determination, resilience, and ingenuity required to achieve victory in the most hostile environments. Ultimately, the Battle of the Philippine Sea and the subsequent Marianas landings reshaped the Pacific theater. Japan's air power had been decimated, its defensive perimeter breached, and its homeland placed under direct threat. The campaign illustrated the evolution of modern warfare, combining air, land, and sea operations with unprecedented coordination and precision. For the men who fought, it was a testament to human endurance and tactical innovation. For history, it marked a decisive step toward the conclusion of the Pacific War. The Marianas had been seized, the path to Japan was clear, and the relentless march of the Allies continued, signaling that the end of the war, though still distant, was now undeniably within reach.